You know, when you try to explain something to somebody and rather than listening, they do this. They might do some crap song to try and avoid any information going in. That's the government. That's like the government when it comes to electric cars. In the UK, there's going to be a ban on the sale of all diesel cars from 2030, apparently. So that means that everyone who currently has one and likes to have a new car has to get into the idea of having an electric car. But as almost everybody understands, it simply doesn't really work. Let's forget about the fact that not all people have their own private driveway where they can just simply plug their car in. Some live on streets, some live in tower blocks. But as I've just said, let's forget about that. Let's just imagine that the whole of the UK has a lovely detached house in suburban Britain and can afford to have the power points put in as well as buying a brand new electric car. But as I've just said, let's forget about that. Let's just imagine that the whole of the UK has a lovely detached house in suburban Britain. There isn't enough electricity being made to make everybody's car electric. That's the problem. It's impossible. Impossible. There's no way that every single car that is on the roads today could actually be powered by the grid. But that doesn't matter because, believe it or not, the government are much smarter than what we give them credit for. Although it looks like they're just doing this and not listening to anything that anybody's saying, they already know this. They know. They knew about all these problems long before you did. Honestly, they're not stupid, but they like us to think that possibly they are. The real thing is, they don't really want everybody having their own personal car. And if they do, they need to be paying a really good contribution towards what's going on with keeping the rest of the country afloat. In 6 years' time, or whenever it is it actually happens, if it happens, and the case is going to be, well, I can't have an electric car because I've got no way to charge it, and besides that, there's not enough electricity. Oh, don't worry about it then, just do without a car. There are buses available. However, if the future is a bit brighter than what I've just made it out to be, and we can all still have personal transport, besides the rest of us that have kept on to their older diesel and petrol cars, then the future is petrol. Yeah, the future is petrol, although they'll probably call it something else by this point. Now, Japan haven't given up on the internal combustion engine. They're still making them. They're still thinking ahead of how they can make them more efficient and how to make them run on easier to come by fuels. But the fact is, we're a long way from running out of oil to make petrol in the first place. Petrol is the greenest way forward for the entire planet. And let's not forget something here. It's only really the UK and Europe and America that take any of these things seriously anyway. The rest of the world doesn't really have to worry about it. And maybe Australia does. Also, let's not get concerned with how electricity is produced in order to power electric cars. Let's not worry at the moment about all of the chemicals that go into the atmosphere to do that. And let's not concern ourselves with batteries and battery powers. Let's not even think about lithium and how damaging it actually is to the environment in the first place, and how many people die mining it, and how ridiculously backward it is to have all these things transported from one side of the world to the next just to make it happen. We can ignore that because we're talking about something else, and we're going to have to ignore it because whatever the case, there's always going to be something being spilled into the air that isn't particularly nice when it comes to transport, the production of the vehicle, which is why I certainly champion the idea of keeping old cars on the road, and also what comes out the exhaust. But the one thing the eco warriors and the government bang on about is it's a bit of a distraction. Carbon footprints. That's bollocks, I'm afraid. The word bollocks is the most suitable and appropriate word to describe that argument. It is bollocks. Carbon's not a problem. Carbon comes and goes. Carbon gets exchanged from one place to another all of the time. Without carbon, we wouldn't have trees and plants that knock out oxygen. It's a constant exchange from one chemical to the next. Carbon is not anything that any of you should be taking that seriously. It really is balls. So what I'd like to say here really is to all those enthusiasts of driving in cars and stuff, don't give up, because the future isn't really green. It's the same colour as the past was. And of course, to anyone who's fully invested in the future of the world being electric and green and stuff, and you don't need to go out of your house, just remember something. The less you go out, the more somebody else has to go out to do it for you. There was a time when every country relied upon itself, every village just did its own thing. They grew their food, they ate their food. The next day happened and it started again. Of course, these days we live in a worldwide community, don't we? And everything that you order online, somebody has to deliver. They have to deliver it using transport. The one thing that you disagree with. If, however, your idea of a utopian future is to be completely self-efficient and live in a house that you've made yourself out of things that you've found all around you, you've bought a plot of land, you just make something, you grow crops, you grow animals, you eat the animals, and you don't really go anywhere. And you don't order stuff online, and you don't bother with the internet because it's unnecessary, unless you just want to see how the rest of the world is actually living. There's not really much of an argument against that. But however, I've never known anybody really want to do that. They want electric power. They just don't understand the consequences of electric power. And it's not just cars, it is wind farms, it's solar panels, it's anything that involves electricity still has to be powered from somewhere. You would think that solar energy would be brilliant, but it's not. Wind farms. Oh gosh, I like a wind farm. I like the look of them on the top of the hills, these rather majestic spinning round windmills with only 3 blades. Huge things are incredibly impressive to view. And also you can't recycle them. They have to be buried in the ground. Once they've killed a few birds, the fiberglass has all started to fall apart. They have to be chucked away. There's an awful lot of maintenance goes on in a wind farm. Back to the point in a second, but if the idea of a wind farm was an experiment to see what it's like, to see what we can really do with this, I'd be okay with that. I'd be fine, yeah, go ahead, let's see what it's like. But no, they've sold you on the idea that that is simply the future and there's no going back on it. Nah, my prediction is actually going to be this, not that my predictions are any more important than anybody else's, but 10 years from now, all of these electric cars will be subject to some sort of scrappage scheme. Get rid of these electric cars off the road. They're so heavy, they're damaging the roads, you can't power them up. What we're going to do with these big lithium batteries, etc. All to get you to drive an internal combustion engine that runs off fermented vegetables. Thank you, bye-bye.